It's almost hard to wrap your head around a world without, well, easy access to information. Think about your day, Googling something, reading a book, even just glancing at headlines.
It's second nature now.
Totally. And so much of that capability, that instant knowledge, traces back to a huge leap in the 15th century.
Ah, the printing press.
Exactly, the printing press. And the man behind it, Johannes Gutenberg. It really is a stark before and after situation.
It absolutely is a genuine turning point. And for our listeners, we really want to dig into, the core of this invention and Gutenberg himself.
Right.
Because his name is famous, sure, but the actual details about his life, surprisingly patchy, lots of gaps.
Which almost makes it more fascinating, doesn't it?
It does, adds a layer of mystery.
Okay, so for this deep dive, our mission is pretty clear. Let's pull out the essential story of Gutenberg. His background, how he got the idea, the press itself, and, importantly, the ripples it sent out. We've got this detailed source material here, and we want to boil it down to really understand his huge impact. So where do we start? Gutenberg's early life.
Yeah, let's do that. Born in Mainz, that's in modern Germany, somewhere between 1394 and 1400.
Okay.
His full name was, get this, Johannes Gensfleisch Sirladen zum Gutenberg.
Wow. Quite a name.
Yeah, you can see why he shortened it. He was from a patrician family, basically upper class, maybe minor nobility in Mainz.
Right.
And his father worked in the cloth trade, but also, and this is interesting, he had a role at the city's mint.
The mint. Okay, that jumps out.
Doesn't it?
Because it's not just handling money, it's about, precision metalworking.
Exactly. The kind of skill you'd need for making coin dies. That meticulousness.
You can sort of see the seeds being planted there, can't you?
Yeah.
For, creating tiny uniform letters later on.
Precisely.
Yeah.
That experience, that understanding of metal, how to shape it accurately, that would have been invaluable.
Makes sense.
And our source mentions, though, again, details are scarce, it's believed he had a decent education, maybe even the University of Erfurt. Plus, his family had to move away from Mainz for a while because of political trouble. Those kinds of disruptions, they can shape how you think, make you more resourceful.
Right, adapting to change.
Yeah.
So, privileged background, probably educated. Then he ends up in Strasbourg around the 1430s. What was he doing there? He didn't just jump straight into printing, did he?
No, not at all. It seems he had this the generally inventive streak. In Strasbourg, he was involved in a few things.
Like what?
Well, teaching crafts, apparently to young nobles, so he had practical skills. And even more curious, perhaps, experimenting with polishing gemstones.
With gemstones. That feels a bit random compared to printing.
It does on the surface, but it shows he was a tinkerer, right?
Yeah.
Someone curious about materials, about processes. Polishing gems needs a delicate touch, an understanding of different materials. It all feeds into that inventive mindset.
Okay, I see. A problem solver, someone looking for better ways to do things. Now let's set the scene. Before Gutenberg, how did books even get made? We hear about monks, right?
We do. And it was incredibly laborious. Mostly monks in monasteries, in scriptoriums, copying texts out entirely by hand.
Just imagine.
The time involved and the cost. Books were luxury items, super rare.
And errors must have crept in with every copy.
Oh, absolutely. Errors would multiply. Now, there was block printing, carving a whole page onto wood.
All right, I've heard of that.
But it was still really limiting for making lots of books, a new block for every single page. Imagine carving a whole Bible like that.
Yikes. Okay, so Gutenberg sees this massive inefficiency. What was his big idea, his goal?
Well, it looks like his genius was in synthesis, taking technologies that already existed and combining them in a totally new way for mass production.
Ah, so not inventing everything from scratch, but connecting the dots.
Exactly. He knew about screw presses, probably from wine or paper making. He knew metalworking. The brilliance was putting them together.
Okay, let's get into the machine itself, the printing press. What were the, killer innovations?
Right. There were a few key things. First, and this is the big one, movable type.
Individual letters.
Yes. Instead of a whole page block, individual letters cast in metal. Making the molds for these adjustable molds was a huge technical challenge.
I bet. They'd have to be incredibly precise, right, to fit
To
together.
get absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
Uniform height, uniform width. Any tiny flaw and the print would be messy. And for languages using an alphabet like Latin or German,
Yeah.
being able to reuse and rearrange those letters, that was revolutionary. Completely changed the economics of printing texts. Much more efficient than, say, for logographic script.
That's a really key point, the fit with alphabetic writing. Okay, what else was crucial?
The ink. You couldn't just use the old water-based inks they used for hand copying or block printing.
Why not?
They didn't stick well to the metal type, gave faint, blurry results, so Gutenberg developed an oil-based ink, probably linseed oil and soot, something like that.
Thicker.
Stickier. Exactly. It clung to the metal, transferred cleanly to paper, and gave really sharp, dark, durable text, a massive improvement in quality.
Okay, so movable type, better ink, and the press mechanism itself. You mentioned wine presses.
Yes, he adapted the screw press design. That mechanism was good at applying strong, even pressure.
Which you'd need to get the ink from all those little letters onto the paper cleanly.
Precisely. Even pressure across the whole form was vital for a clear impression. It seems obvious now, maybe, but applying that existing tech to printing was ingenious.
So you put it all together. Movable type, oil-based ink, the press mechanism. And the first really big project to show this off was the Gutenberg Bible.
That's the one. Produced roughly between 1452 and 1455, it's often called the 42-line Bible.
His masterpiece.
Absolutely. First major book printed with movable type in Europe, and the scale they printed around 180 copies, some on paper, some on pricey vellum, which is animal skin.
180 copies.
Yep.
I mean, compared to maybe a handful of manuscript copies of anything, that's huge.
It's a massive leap in availability, and the quality, as you said, it really held its own against the best handwritten manuscripts of the day.
Which is incredible for mass production at that time.
It really is. It proved you could scale up without sacrificing the craft. And it wasn't just about the Bible as a religious text, it was a demonstration. Look what this technology can do. It can make literature accessible.
But it wasn't all smooth sailing for Gutenberg himself, was it? I seem to remember reading about money problems, a lawsuit.
Sadly, no. It was a struggle. He borrowed quite a bit of money to get the whole thing going, mainly from a financier named Johann Fust.
Okay.
And around 1455, Fust sued him, claimed Gutenberg had misused the funds.
Oh, dear.
And the court sided with Fust. Gutenberg basically lost control of his workshop, his equipment, everything he'd built.
Wow, brutal. After inventing something so revolutionary, to lose it like that? What happened then? Did he just stop printing?
Well, Fust teamed up with Peter Schoeffer, who had worked for Gutenberg, and they continued the printing business. They put out the Main Psalter in 1457, which is another famous early printed book.
Right, and Gutenberg.
His activities after the lawsuit are less clear. The source suggests he might have carried on printing, but probably on a much smaller scale. His big operation was gone.
So the guy who changed the world didn't actually get rich or famous from it in his lifetime?
Largely no. He remained relatively obscure, which is pretty sobering when you think about the impact he'd eventually have.
It's a real paradox, isn't it? Did he get any recognition before he died?
Actually, yes, a bit, right at the end. In 1465, a few years before his death, the Archbishop of Nassau gave him a kind of pension.
Oh, really?
Yeah, an annual allowance, some provisions, clothing. It wasn't wealth, but it suggests that some powerful people did recognize his contribution, even if the world hadn't quite caught on yet.
So a little late acknowledgement. And then he died in Mainz in 1468. Still kind of mysterious, though we don't know exactly how or even where he's buried.
Adds to the enigma, but his legacy, that's crystal clear, monumental.
Absolutely. The effects were just transformative.
Completely. The biggest, most immediate thing was, well, knowledge got democratized, books became cheaper, more available.
So literacy starts to climb.
Exactly. And that ripples out everywhere. Science, religion, culture.
How did it fuel something like the scientific revolution?
Think about sharing discoveries before the press. Hand copying papers. So slow.
Impractical.
The press let scientists get their findings out there fast, wide. Ideas could be shared, debated, built on across Europe much more quickly. It accelerated everything.
And religion. The Reformation comes to mind, Luther's 95 Theses.
Perfect example. Once those were printed, they spread like wildfire,
Right.
challenging the church's authority in a way that just wouldn't have been possible before. The press was a powerful tool for spreading those new ideas.
And culturally, the Renaissance was happening around then, too.
Yeah, and the press helped hugely. Suddenly, classical texts from Greece and Rome became much more accessible.
So people could read Plato or Cicero directly?
Exactly. It fed that whole rediscovery of classical learning, fueled the arts, philosophy. It helped create a more informed public.
It makes total sense why he was called Man of the Millennium by that A&E list back in '99. The impact is just immense. Now, what about some of those intriguing little details, things people might not know?
Well, one important point our source makes is that Gutenberg didn't actually invent movable type from absolute zero.
Oh,
It had been used in China centuries earlier. But Gutenberg's system with the metal casting, the molds, the press, it was much more suited to alphabetic scripts and just way more efficient for that context.
so it was the application and refinement that was revolutionary for Europe.
Precisely. It's often about adapting existing ideas, not always pure invention from nothing.
That's a good point about innovation. We mentioned the gemstone polishing earlier.
Yeah, I think that just highlights he wasn't a one-trick pony. He had broad technical skills, a curious mind. He liked solving problems with materials.
And the fact we don't know what he looked like. No contemporary portraits.
Right. All those pictures you see of Gutenberg. They're guesswork, basically. Artists imagining him much later. It reminds you how much of the past is interpretation.
True. And finally, the sort of sad irony that this world-changing invention didn't make him personally wealthy.
No, he faced those lawsuits, lost his press. It seems his drive was maybe more about the challenge, the creation itself, than making a fortune.
Fascinating. Okay, so just to recap for everyone listening, Johannes Gutenberg, this sort of shadowy but brilliant figure from 15th century Germany, pulls together existing ideas with his own innovations, movable type, oil-based ink, the press, and utterly changes how books are made,
Right.
making knowledge far more accessible, boosting literacy, and really truly laying the foundation for the information age we're all swimming in today. His work had consequences far beyond what anyone, maybe even he, could have imagined back then.
Absolutely. And that brings us to a final thought for you, the listener. Given all the challenges Gutenberg faced, financial woes, lawsuits, not getting much recognition in his own time, what inventions or ideas bubbling up today do you think might have a similarly huge, but maybe currently underestimated impact down the line?
That's interesting.
What are we seeing now that future generations might look back on as a Gutenberg-level shift, even if we don't fully see it yet? It's something to ponder as technology keeps racing forward, building on the past, just like Gutenberg built on what came before him.